But I get into that history in full detail with all the proof. Because it was so-called white people coming over as slaves. We weren't coming over as slaves. And we didn't never come over as slaves. We never came over as slaves. They started taking Africans from Africa, bringing them to America in the mid-1850s. This is when they did it. And it's easily proven for people who do their research. It's easily proven. And I proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. As everybody knows right now, it's the middle of Black History Month. And this time of year is the time where we just reinforce some really bad things that we have to start letting go of. Because one, a lot of it's not true. Most of it's not true. Most of it's completely not true at all. And every time, this is the time of year where we start celebrating our victimhood, where we celebrate that we were slaves from Africa, where we reinforce that we're slaves from Africa. And we're not. One, we're not. Okay. And then two, even if we were, which we're not, when you go through a trauma and then you celebrate that trauma, what would you make a month, an entire month for, to celebrate your trauma? Because that's the only thing we talk about is, oh, we were slaves from Africa and we've come such a long way because the great white man, and he finally set us free. I mean, this is what we really do. When we make, every time we say that we're slaves or make the reference to our slavery, we are subconsciously making ourselves believe that we are beneath so-called white people. We are subconsciously programming ourselves to believe that so-called white people are oh so great and we're not. Because when you look at who's the slave and who's the slave master, well, the slave master is the one with all the power, right? And the slave's just getting his butt whooped, right? He's just getting whooped. The way they tell it, we didn't even fight back. They just came over to Africa and corralled 20 million of our people up. And we just went along for the ride. They only needed 5 people on the ship, and they could put 500 of us on the ship. And with 5 white people, they could just, boat us all down and carry us on a 3-month journey, bolt it down on the floor, right? You couldn't go to the bathroom, go into the bathroom on yourself, throwing up on yourself, the whole time. I mean, this is just the most ridiculous story, the way they tell it that it happened. But, that aside, it's celebrating a trauma. Whenever you say that you're a slave, you are automatically programming yourself to believe that the slave master, whoever that slave master is better than you. Well, they had to be better than you because they had overpowered you and made you work for free, right? I'd like to see, look, this whole slave story, it started coming out when It started getting ingrained in our conscious when the novel called Roots, right, back in the 80s came out. And this novel was made into a miniseries. They made this was the most watched miniseries at the time. I mean, everybody was watching it and everybody believed it. Everybody believed it. And come to find out, after everybody was already programmed to believe that this is really what happened, even though this is not even close to what happened. Okay, first of all. Second of all, it was a novel that was plagiarized. And the person who wrote the original one years earlier, who sued Alex Haley, who wrote this novel, which it's a novel, like, you know, A Christmas Carol is a novel, right? It's a novel. Harry Potter is a novel, right? This was complete fiction. And the dude won his court case. He won. They paid him $500,000, which $500,000 is a whole lot more money back in the 80s than it is today. Whole lot more money. Okay. We ain't even talk about inflation, right? So anyway, they had to pay him all this money because it was a fake story. But this story of Kunta Kinte, and they was coming over here and, your name is Toby. Psh, my name is Kunta. Right. This is what they really got us, but it's 40, 50 so-called black people, right, at a plantation, and they just getting whooped. And don't nobody do nothing about it. They just watch. It's only one white dude. They just watch. See, this is a program. And it's based off a complete lie. This is how you train animals in the circus to jump through hoops that can eat you. You have to trick that animal into believing that you're Almighty God. And that whip is an extension of yourself. You have to teach animals that you can't just walk into a cage with a lion. You can't just get a lion to jump through hoops of fire and wear funny outfits. That lion can eat you. You have to mind control that lion. And it ain't no different from people. So they put this program out to make us believe that we were slaves from Africa. And we weren't. I proved that slavery, there were some slaves from Africa. This is true. And they didn't start coming until the mid-1850s. The Civil War started in the 1860s. The African slaves started coming 15 years before the Civil War, which ended slavery, started. See, they don't tell you that part. They don't tell you anything about the white people being slaves. They don't tell you anything about black people being slave masters. See, but I proved it all beyond a shadow of a doubt in the book Lost Along the Way. But my point is what I'm trying to get across to you is that you have to stop celebrating this fictitious trauma. Now, have so-called black people been traumatized? Absolutely. By so-called white people? Absolutely. But the storyline and what happened is a complete lie. It's a complete lie. White people were the slaves. Black people were the slave masters. White people fought for their freedom and got it. And when they got it, they got revenge on their former slave masters. This is what done happened. And then they tricked us into believing that we was the slaves the whole time. Did white people put us into slavery? Yes, they did. Started on July 4th, 1830. On July 4th, 1830. That's when it started, right? They didn't finish the job until the 1860s. They had about 30 years. And it was it was in the 1850s that they got the bright idea to go over to Africa and start bringing over some Africans. This is where they came up with the idea. This is when they came up with the idea. And it's not maybe did this happen. There's records to prove everything that I'm saying. And I already found all the records. See, this is what they don't want you to know. Okay? Even if it did happen the way they say it happened, which it did not. Even if it did happen the way they said it happened, what would you celebrate your trauma for? Who celebrates trauma? The trauma that happens to them. People, your brain is designed to suppress trauma when trauma happens to you. It's designed to suppress trauma. So people go through some craziness and can't remember it and don't remember it. They'll forget it because their brain is protecting them. But we're the only group of people who celebrate our trauma, which is not even a real trauma. We do have real trauma. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that the storyline of when the trauma happened and who the trauma happened to is a complete joke. It's a complete joke that started in the year 1914 and has been embellished ever since. And they have come up with this mind control game that they play on us. We started thinking this movie reinforced. There's another movie that helped reinforce this slave talk, this slaves from Africa talk, which is Uncle Tom. But they don't tell you about the other Uncle Tom movie. Don't nobody watch that. The one that came out in the 20s. If you was to watch the Uncle Tom movie that came out in the 20s, it's a silent film, so they know we're not about to watch that. But if you was to actually sit down and watch it, and then you sit back and watch the one that came out in the 80s, you're gonna be like, oh, see, they got caught. They got caught. They got caught. It's not even about Uncle Tom. He has a part in it, right? And then the original Uncle Tom was white. See, we sure not about to talk about that. I mean, they got advertisements with a white Uncle Tom. This is what they got before it was a movie. Back in the 1850s. 1853. Right? I'm not going to get too heavy and detailed into it because I prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt in the book, Lost Along the Way. This mind control that we've been sold, it's time to stop it. As long as we believe that so-called white people are oh so great and we're slaves from Africa, it's just Black History Month. The point of it is to reinforce our trauma, to reinforce the false beliefs that we're slaves from Africa. Right? This is what it is. This is when all the shows come on. All the shows come on where we talking in our slave. Yes, master. I was gonna do. I be good slave, master. This is. I've never heard anybody talk like that. Like, I mean, I've lived down south. I've lived out west. I've lived east coast. I've lived up north, and I have never heard anybody running around talking like these so-called, well, yes, oh, master, I was sorry, master, it was an accident. No, please don't whip me, master. I ain't never heard nobody talk like that. And I know that nobody talk like that. It's just a big game that gets us believing. It's a hypnosis. We start hearing that slave voice and we start thinking of the spiritual hymns from Africa. Those old slave spiritual hymns. One day we's gonna be free. It's just absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry, it's just absolutely ridiculous. It's ridiculous when you know the truth. It's ridiculous when you know the truth. See? And the truth done been uncovered. And it's time to start learning the truth. And it's time to stop celebrating. First of all, we're supposed to celebrate Black History Month. When is White History Month? Oh, they don't have a month. Every month is White History Month. And we took 11 of the months, and here you guys go. I mean, and to accept 1 month when they get 11 months is to accept second-class citizenship. That's to accept crumbs. You're being trained to accept crumbs when you have the audacity to celebrate this nonsense. And it's complete nonsense. Now, what do we do it for? Because we've been trained since we was little kids that we slaves from Africa. But it wasn't always like that, see? Because before we started going to the so-called white people's schools, we didn't believe we were slaves from Africa. We didn't get taught that we were slaves from Africa. We knew that we were from America originally. Did nobody bring 20 million black slaves over in 15 years? They didn't do it. There were slaves getting brought to America, but they weren't black. They were white. See? They were white. That's the big secret. That's what don't nobody want to tell you. But you don't see them having no White History Month. And they're never about to come out and voluntarily tell you that they was the slaves from Europe. And you was their slave master. That's the last thing they about to tell you. It's the last thing they about to tell you. Come on, keep on singing them. You was a slave from Africa now. Let's get it back together now. Don't nobody talk like that. I was watching they had a little show about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And Martin Luther King, when he talked, he put on that, wow, yes, sir. I think we should be some good Negroes. I mean, that's how they got him up there talking. He ain't talk like that. But that's what they got us trained to do, is put on that slave voice and celebrate victimhood and embrace the victimhood and of not doing anything for ourselves, because we're the only people on the planet who don't do for ourselves. Every group of people on the planet does for themselves. Every group of people on the planet polices themselves. If you in China and the police get behind you, it's somebody who look like you who's going to pull you over. Do they have any problem with, do they have Black Lives Matter, and do they have people shooting, police shooting? No, they don't have that problem, right? And it's not just white, it's not just Chinese people and so-called white people. If you go to Africa, you get pulled over, it's some so-called somebody who looks like you is pulling you over. So they ain't pulling you over just because you look like you look. See, that's not the issue. Now, they still got crime. They still got stuff going on, right? But it's not because of what we get shot up for. They don't just pull you over just because, right? Just because they ain't got nothing to do. And we've all been through it. Everybody who look so-called black people done been through it. I ain't got to convince you. And if you haven't been through it yet because you're of the younger generation, you most likely gonna go through it because we got certain things in common. But we doing this on a program because we've been doing this because we really believe that we are so-called slaves from Africa, and we're not slaves from Africa. We did go through slavery. And it lasted from July 4th, 1830 until the end of the Civil War. So 35 years. There was a genocide that was taken out on our people right here in America. This absolutely happened. I'm not going to get into too deep into that. But we have to stop celebrating our victimhood, and we have to stop believing that so-called white people are oh so great when they used to be in the same exact position that we're in. It's just they're giving us the solution to get out of it, and the solutions that they give us never work because they're not trying to really get us out of our situation. See, they don't want us to get out of our situation. Right? They remember being the slaves, and they made an oath to never let white slavery happen again. See, that's the secret. They made an oath to never let white slavery happen again. They made an oath to never be the so-called black man slave ever again. And they've been successful at that. Right? It's not just even the Black History Month as far as celebrating 1 month out the year that's supposed to be for us. We celebrating that we get this 1 month. Well, Master said we get us a month. Let's celebrate. Just that in itself, when we know that there's 12 months and we get one, just that in itself is letting you know where you stand. Just that one in itself. We have to stop worshiping white Jesus. When we subconsciously believe that so-called the slave master, he wasn't just the slave master. Right? This is why we're in our situation. He wasn't just the slave master for 400 years. He is also God. This is what we believe. We believe that the so-called white man is God. Because every single church you go to is going to have a picture hanging up of a white Jesus. Blonde hair, blue-eyed, white Jesus. This is what we see. When we do some research into the subject, Jesus never was portrayed as white until Cesare Borgia started to be portrayed by his father, the Pope Alexander, starting in 1492, a few months after the Jews got kicked out of Spain, which we don't know those are black Jews. I'm not about to get into that right now. But this is when the Catholic Church, the so-called white people, took over the Catholic Church. They started to take over the Catholic Church at this point in time. They started to take over the Catholic Church. And there was a plan to start making so-called white people look better by making them into Jesus. Because if you look at any ancient painting, if you look at any old painting, all of the old paintings of Jesus are so-called black people. All of them. That's why the Hebrew Israelites run around talking about how, well, you know Jesus is black. Right? They stood on the street corner preaching it. Of course he is. Of course he is. Right? That's a whole nother subject within itself, which I'm not going to get into because it's super deep. But you have to be able to look at your God as who you are. That has to be you. You can't look at another race of people as God. When first of all, it's just not even true. It'd be one thing you could argue that yes, you can, if it was true. But it's not true. It's not true. Ever since the Battle of New Orleans, it started happening really after July 4th. The Battle of New Orleans was the beginning of it. It started a little bit before that to lead up to that. But ever since the 1830s, you can't find anything where so-called black people are getting talked bad about until we get to the 1830s. Right? But we were supposed to be slaves since, 400 years, 19 is their favorite day to say we came to. No, we didn't come to America as slaves in 1619. That's an absolute lie. It's an absolute lie. As they like to say, black lies. It's an absolute lie. But I get into that history in full detail with all the proof. Because it was so-called white people coming over as slaves. We weren't coming over as slaves. And we didn't never come over as slaves. We never came over as slaves. They started taking Africans from Africa, bringing them to America in the mid-1850s. This is when they did it. And it's easily proven for people who do their research. It's easily proven. And I proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Ever since so-called white people got their freedom, which is White Independence Day, is the secret reason we celebrate the 4th of July. Ever since they got their freedom from their black slave master, they've associated everything that's so-called black as bad. They've associated everything that's black as bad. The devil, if you look at old newspapers, old books, ever since that time period, black. Anywhere where the Catholic Church was in charge, you're going to see a black devil and a white Jesus. Everything that's black is bad. Slaves. All you got to do is say the word slave. Who's going to come to mind? Black people. Nighttime is when the so-called black, when it's black outside, is when the so-called black people start committing crimes. You better go lock your door. Black people might break into your house. You know they the criminals, right? Jesus is white. All the angels are white. The Jesus and his disciples at the Last Supper, all white people. Muhammad Ali's got a real nice video where he goes out and says, and gives some real good comparisons about how everything good is white and everything bad is black. Down to cake. Angel cake is white. The devil's cake, food cake, is the black food cake. That's the chocolate cake. The king of the jungle, Tarzan, is white. How is the white guy the king of the jungle? Everything that revolves around beauty is white. If you turn on your television, all you're going to see is so-called white people. One of the craziest things, if you were to ever go to another country and really live in that country and really absorb the culture, what you'll start finding out is people in those countries, they don't think that so-called black people even live in America. They think that America is 99% so-called white people. This is what they really believe. They don't get BET over in these other countries. They just get the normal channels, the news. When they do see black people, they're getting locked up, criminals. You know, oh, those is the slaves. They was the slaves. The only time you're going to see, you don't, as a result of not seeing any type of so-called black people on television, people in these other countries believe, they really believe that there are barely any black people here. Now, we know way better than that. But you got to live here to know that. They come over here and get culture shock. They're like, where's all these people come from? Oh my God, I thought it was all white people. Because the television programs, they program us into believing this nonsense. They program us into believing this nonsense. They've got, every time they have a beauty pageant, they had beauty pageants for years, all the way up until the 80s. And Vanessa Williams finally won. And that was the first, because that's the first so-called black woman, light-skinned black woman with, greenish eyes, who won. We finally, and then it ended in scandal, of course, right? Because you finally give her one, and we finally, and it's got to end in scandal, right? So, I mean, Miss Universe, they have there been some so-called black Miss America's, Miss USA? Yes, there have. But out of the 100 and who knows how many of Miss Pageant winners, you only got a handful of so-called black women. Only a handful. So what does that say to the young girl? We got all these beautiful sisters all over the country. Beautiful. And you couldn't never find none of them who's beautiful. They could never beat a so-called white woman, because we know that whiteness is holy. Jesus is white. The angels are white. God is white. This is holy. I mean, this is what it teaches the kids and this is why we believe this nonsense. Because we done been taught since we was 2 and 3 year olds. They got experiments when they can give the little child a choice between the black doll and the white doll, and they only 3-4 years old, and they all pick the white doll. Cause just from watching television, they even a child knows the program. They learn the program. We're real young. All we see when we watch on television is so-called white people playing the best roles. But the black cat is bad luck. A white lie is okay, but that black lie, white magic is the good magic. But that black magic, that's that evil magic. Snow White is so pure as the driven snow. And the wicked witch has her evil black face, black outfit on. I mean, you could just go on and on about this. Right? The little ugly duckling is a black duck. right? Everything good is white. Everything black is bad. Santa Claus, white. The president, white. White House, white. They finally gave us a president, and he's not one. He's from Africa. They gave us a woman vice president. She's from India. They not Negroes. They not the colored people of America. They not the so-called slaves from Africa. No. We didn't get that. Africans come over here and they don't claim us. They don't even like us. They don't treat us like they like us. I've never been treated like I'm really loved by Africans, and I've been around a bunch of Africans. Every now and then I'll run across one or two, but they look down on us. We claim them, they don't claim us. I mean, it comes down to the movies. We used to never have any type of black movies. And then they finally gave us some. And you can't have no happy endings. We don't get no happy endings. They had that movie, Set It Off. The girls go and rob banks. And all of them get killed or locked up. And one of them gets away quietly. And well, she don't even get all the money. She just dead presidents. They were robbing armored trucks and everybody gets killed. Terrible endings. Well, but you let Ocean's 11 come out. They go hijack for $50 billion and, they get away with it. Everybody gets away with it. And everybody's happy and celebrating when the white boy is doing the robbing. When he's on the movie and he's doing the heist. Oh, he doesn't only do the heist. He does it for 10 times the amount that the so-called black people get caught. Because when they do it, they get caught. And they have a sad ending at the end of their movie. Right? They get caught. But when the white guy does it, he gets away with everything. He gets away with everything. I mean, we have to break this mind control that we're under. And we're only under it because we don't control our own media. So we see all these images and we don't control our schools. And we don't know that the people who are teaching us in school, not the people who teach us today, but the way this whole thing got set up, the structure, we don't realize that the structure of the whole thing was set up by complete racists whose parents and grandparents were black people's slaves. In 1914, when Hollywood started, the first Hollywood film was called The Klansman. Well, that's not true. Well, it is true. They just renamed it, and now it's called Birth of a Nation. Why would it be called Birth of a Nation? And if you watch that movie, they couldn't get no black actors to be in it because back then, so-called black people had too much pride to be in some movie like that. They couldn't get one. They couldn't get one. So what do they do to put on blackface? We couldn't do it. We couldn't get them to do it. So we'll just put some blackface on and we'll do it. I mean, that's what they did. Right? And who's the Ku Klux Klan? They the heroes of the movie. It's called The Klansman. This is what skyrocketed. The membership in the Klan. Right? Saving the white woman from the black people who's trying to rape them black men who won't rape the white women. We better go lynch them black men trying to rape the white woman. I mean, this is the types of things that we're celebrating when we do this Black History Month. And the other thing that we talk about during Black History Month, other than the fact that we was the slaves from Africa, right, is Oh, we was the first black person to finally do something that so-called white people been doing for years. It's time to celebrate that. I mean, how bad do you look when somebody else been doing this for 100 years and then you finally did it? Wow, we the first one. I'm the first. I mean, this is absolute nonsense, and it's really nonsense once you really know what the history is and you know the true history behind it and you know the truth behind this thing. Then you really can get offended. You just get offended. Like, you get completely offended by even hearing all this nonsense. Everything that we done sit up here and created and invented a million different things that done got stolen from us and had some so-called white guy take credit for after they were already in control. And when they get in control, July 4th, 1830. Before that, they weren't in control. They couldn't vote. See, there was a lot of stuff happening. The truth about Juneteenth is a celebration about how so-called white people got out of slavery, not so-called black people. Ain't nobody never heard of Juneteenth until 5-10 years ago. Why? Because they didn't have the audacity to do that back. Now they feel like their mind control is so strong over us that they can get us to celebrate when they got their slavery, they got their freedom. The war started because there was a war. I'm not going to get way too much into it because it's too long of a story. And that's why I wrote an entire book about it. I made it into a video book, an audio book, and then a video book. So it's got pictures that goes along with it. It's 30 hours long. And it takes that long. Listen to it for an hour a day for 30 days and find out who you are. Find out your real identity. There's nobody who's going to read that book and then to ever celebrate Black History Month ever again in their life. Because they're going to know that they're celebrating the end of white slavery from the so-called black slave master. That's what this liberty is. That's what liberty is. Liberty from so-called the black slave master. We don't know that, though. We're not slaves from Africa. We're the original people of America. When we believe we're slaves from Africa, we don't claim our land. This is our land. It always has been. They didn't come over here and bring 20 million people from a whole nother continent over here. It didn't happen like that. To some place that was completely empty. Wasn't nobody over here. Yeah, right. So-called white people never talk about how they were the slaves when they were the slaves. They don't talk about how they freed themselves from slavery. They used to. They used to say it loud and proud. But they stopped doing that. They stopped doing it in the early 1900s. They stopped doing it. It used to be front page news. But then they stopped doing it. And they stopped doing it for a reason. Because they felt like it's an easier way it's easier to not fight us. And it would be easier to trick us if they can trick us. Once they found out how that movie worked, once they discovered Hollywood, they've been using mind control ever since. They've been using mind control. They saw that we don't even have to fight them. All we got to do is trick them into thinking that they was the slaves. And they've been doing that. And they are on some long-term generational plans. Stop claiming you're slaves from Africa. Stop celebrating Black History Month. It's not for you. We were the kings and queens of Europe. And we sent so-called white people to the colonies in America, and the colonies were prisons. The colonies were prisons. They got their freedom from the prisons. July 4th, 1830. They had black slave masters. Go to lostalongtheway.org. Go to lostalongtheway.org and learn who you are, and stop celebrating victimhood, because you're not no victim. Have traumas happened to you? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because ever since our downfall on July 4th, 1830, it has been some trauma that's happened to us. But it didn't start in 1619 with slaves getting brought over from Africa. No, it didn't happen like that. It happened on July 4th, 1830 in New Orleans. That's where it happened at. It's time to know the truth. Go to lostalongtheway.org, learn who you are. Find out that you're not no slaves, and stop celebrating this nonsense of a month that makes you look completely stupid and celebrates a trauma of victimhood that's not even a true story. It's not even a true story. lostalongtheway.org.
This is a dangerous groups that we're dealing with now.